Bienvenidos. Welcome back to the Alex Clark Youngwood. Oh, we dropped the Clark. My full name is Christopher Alexander Robert Clark Youngblood. I dropped the Clark, my mother's last name, for the purpose of the podcast. I felt like Alex Youngwood was more marketable and more minimalist. Too many names, man. 5 names: Christopher Alexander Robert Clark Youngblood. It feels cumbersome. So I'm just cutting down to Alex Youngblood. And what I'm starting to transition to is Christ Youngblood. My first name is Christopher. Everyone shortens that to Chris. Why not Christ? Is that offensive? I mean, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's kind of badass, right? Like Christ, like the most important figure in Western civilization. By all accounts, like an admirable guy, someone we should all look up to and aspire to be more like. I'm Christ, 2000, wasn't he supposed to be reborn 2000 years later? It's about this time. So we're all Christ. I just happen to have the actual name. You know, that's how I feel honestly about religion and everything. Is like we're all God, or should I strive to be God-like, and we're all our little own little gods who can create our own little heavens, our own little hells. You know, in your own little world, your own little simulation. So yeah, you're Christ, I'm God, you're God, Muhammad. You know, be more Christ-like, loving to thy neighbor, turning the other cheek. Uh, being like super resilient if you're undergoing extreme forms of torture, like a slow murder. I never read the Bible, but walk on water, do cool shit like walk on water, perform miracles, your own miracles. What is a miracle within your own existence? Yeah, so it's week 8 of the Legion of Zoo podcast. My name is Alex Youngblood. This is my podcast, and earlier this week we put up my final. Well, I'm sure Alberto Crane will be back on the show, but part 3 of 3 for now of the Alberto Crane interview, which is getting back to what this podcast originally was me interviewing people who I love and respect and whose life stories I want to learn more about. Um, and then over the last 2 months, to transition to this like pseudo Seattle Seahawks, really just by proxy, Mike McDonald, Seahawks podcast by proxy, Mike McDonald podcast by respect and admiration, which truly inspired it. Is this dude Mike McDonald, who me and a bunch of my friends grew up with and went to school with, and he's now the head coach of Seattle Seahawks, and that is phenomenally inspirational. I've repeated this several times, but I'll just keep doing it. It just it reinvigorates my like a dream like potentiality of the mind. It like reinvigorates my a childlike vigor for life in me. It really does. I think it's so badass. And I'm not even really into football, clearly. Like I'm thinking about this if no one, like I send all this text out to my the 10, 15 people that are on this group chat with us to come on here and talk football because it's like, something that I'm increasingly an extremist and kind of weird guy. And I'm increasingly not living necessarily the kind of lifestyle that my friends are, although I'm a nanny and like my wife revolves around raising 2 little girls. And so I don't party or do things like that. But like I don't have children of my own. I don't have a home or mortgage or shit like that. My life plan is a little different. I identify as an 18-year-old. So I'm kind of more on the path of an 18-year-old right now. Eventually I do want to have kids and settle down and do all that stuff. But I'm still figuring things out just like any 18-year-old is. And anyway, so talking about the Seahawks and all this shit unites us. But if they don't show up to the pod, I don't really care that much about football. But I'll try to get into it a little bit. And then I'll just ramble as well. So where do we stand with the Seattle Seahawks coach Mike McDonald? 4-3 in the season, winning record. I think they're pushing close to first in the division. The NFC is fucking loaded, so it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough slog making the playoffs. It's going to be a tough slog to win that division with the 49ers scrapping and clawing, as well as the Rams and the Arizona Cardinals. Total wild card machine. Uh, there's no telling what they're gonna do exactly. Uh, but the Seahawks are very much alive in this division. Tough game coming up this week, week 8 against the Buffalo Bills. But actually, before we move on to that, let's celebrate last week's game, week 7, homecoming for our Lord and Savior, our best friend, head coach Mike McDonald, heading back to Atlanta, in the place where we all grew up, the place we call home. And man, coming home as the head coach of an NFL franchise to the city that we all grew up in, like went to Falcons games at the Georgia Dome, now Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's crazy, man. So super fucking badass that he got the win there. It's fucking incredible. It's fucking incredible. It's so cool. I wrote in hindsight, I live out in LA, but in hindsight, I wish I would have flown back to the game. Uh, I wish I could go to all of these games, honestly, but that would have been a cool one to go to. I'm planning on going to I went to the home opener in Seattle against the Broncos, and I plan on going to apparently, first time I looked at the Seahawks schedule was last night, 2 nights ago, the season closer, last game of the season against the Rams here in LA. So I'll get to go the first game and the last game, which would be badass. Uh, but yeah, huge win last week. Uh, Everybody kind of got back on track. I want to talk specific Seahawks stuff, which I hesitate to do because no one probably. Well, anyway, Mike Jarrell got the start at right tackle, which is a big deal. The offensive line is that right tackle spot has been an issue all season long. They brought in Roy Robertson Harris from the Jacksonville Jaguars to kind of shore up the defensive line. It's very badass because also this week they brought in Ernest Jones, linebacker from formerly he won the Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Rams. Um, Performed very well, won some more money, ended up getting traded to the Titans in the offseason, and the Titans have now dealt him to our Seattle Seahawks. So it's cool that they continue to build this roster, especially on the defensive side, which is where Mike specializes. So clearly he doesn't have all of the personnel that he would like to ideally run this team, right? First year head coach, he's inheriting to a large extent a roster that he didn't create. So it's cool that they're constantly adding dudes. I feel like they're doing that during the offseason. Not that I followed the offseason that well, but I felt like they're doing that in train. I guess I kind of caught up hindsight. Like I listened to podcasts and shit about the offseason, but like a week before the season started. It feels like they're being very active about continually filling in this roster, continuing adding new players, especially on the defensive side. And that's a good sign that they think they're still in this thing. I mean, it's obvious they're still in this thing. Spit all my fucking mouth. Um, so that's super encouraging. Ba, 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 ba. Yeah, but this upcoming week, DK Metcalf out. Last week, I want to shout out Kenneth Walker the third. Dude, I think this dude, ever since I've seen this guy his rookie year, I thought that, honestly, this guy is the best running back in the league. And just seems the most talented. He seems the most like the Saquon. It's a lot of good backs. Christian McCaffrey when he's healthy. Saquon. Him and Saquon, honestly. The two dudes I would take. Him and Saquon. He's Saquon-esque, right? He has the speed, he has the power, he has the agility, he has the ability to catch the ball in the backfield. He made a fucking sick touchdown grab last week against the Falcons. And apparently super sick all last week. So super very cool to see him be able to play through it. Unfortunately, they lost DK Metcalf. And last I checked fantasy rosters, he is doubtful for tomorrow's game with an MCL sprain, I believe, MCL sprain, which is shitty. But they got dudes, Jackson Smith and Jibba can step up, Tyler Lockett's um, you know, a veteran, high level wide receiver throughout his career. Jake Bobo could step up, which would be badass. Noah Fant is super talented tight end. So there's options. Um, Laviska Shenault was a highly touted prospect, first round wide receiver coming out of school back in 2020. Actually, I remember that draft, the 2020 COVID draft. Laviska Shenault was a loaded wide receiver draft. Laviska Shenault, I mean, who turned out to be the studs was Justin Jefferson, Jerry Judy ish. Laviska Shenault, Jalen Rigger. Actually, I guess only Justin Jefferson popped. I think that was Henry Ruggs the third, who ended up going to jail for manslaughter, drunk, killed someone who was driving drunk. I believe is what it was, or speeding something. Uh, Ton of first round prospect. Justin Jefferson was the dude that popped out of all that. And actually, I remember we did a Zoom call YouTube show for that draft as well. And Mike hopped on that one. I remember I had of my wide receiver list. I had Jalen Rager out of TCU as number one. He's been the worst. I don't know if this. I think I saw him last week. He's still in the league. But Justin Jefferson clearly number one out of that draft. But Laviska Shenault now on the Seahawks, super talented dude, just hasn't put together. I don't know the details of exactly why he hasn't reached his full potential or whatever, but seems to have the skills. Um, uh, at least with the ball in his hand. Seems like he has the skills. Once the ball's in his hand. But it's the Bills. No DK Metcalf. The Bills are sick. Um, Seahawks all year struggled on both sides of the ball in the running game. Struggled in running the football, and they've struggled stopping the run, which was obviously a huge reason to bring in a fucking behemoth human being like Roy Robertson Harris and a more run stopping style linebacker like Ernest Jones, as opposed to kind of this newer age in space, more pass rushy, athletic body type, uh, fluid type of outside linebacker like they had in Jerome Baker, who they traded to the Titans in exchange for Ernest Jones, as well as the Seahawks in a fourth round pick to the Titans. So swap linebackers instead of fourth rounder. Ernest Jones, I guess Jerome Baker just wasn't fitting the bill as far as stuffing the run, being I think more of like a physical, traditional Mike linebacker, middle linebacker. Um, que más? So it's home game. I think the Seahawks are 3-point dogs at home, which makes sense, I guess. I'm always going to ride with the Seahawks. I'm always going to ride with Coach Mike. But total candor, it's a tough game. Obviously, the Bills are our sixth squad, but it'll be interesting. I'm super excited for it. I actually do get excited for this shit. I have trouble sitting down and watching a full football game, but if I've consumed enough cannabis, it's late enough at night, close to bedtime, I can start winding down. Energy level comes down. I can kind of um, lock into sedentary existence for an hour or so. Um, que más? I guess as far as football, let's see, I get it in my head. Oh, last week, UJ, huge fucking win. Not that I'm going to turn this into a totally football show, especially I don't think anyone's showing up. Um, less, but mostly dudes are UJ dudes. And we'll see if people stop showing up on the pod, then there'll be less and less football talk, and it'll just I'll keep checking on the Seahawks and we'll see how it goes. But I really enjoy doing this. Doing all of this regardless every week is forcing me to I know I want to do this podcast. The only thing that's going to stand in um using this podcast as a vehicle for investigating truth in life and sharing my life story and all that shit is my consistency and kind of work ethic and discipline, which once seriously, Coach Mike teach is inspiring me to do that. Like he's showing us what you can achieve if you're focused and disciplined. And I've known that about him his entire life, less tangibly being able to quite understand uh, kind of the X plus what A plus B equals C type of equation of who he is. Just a far more mature person than I ever was at a far younger age. I mean, still like my mature I think Coach Mike probably came out of the womb more mature than I am now. So, yeah, I've got work to do. Uh, but Coach Mike inspiring us to do that and keep it. This, so I consider this podcast like a weekly rep. Like what fucking bullshit talking to no one. It's good reps for me to get this podcast down, talk about football, something I know that doesn't require a ton of prep on my end. Um, and then once the football season ends, start transitioning this into um something very different, something very different. But establishing that work ethic structure, that routine of every week getting on the mic, uh, talking, whatever, expressing your mind without anxiety, without concern of the results or the numbers or what you might say. Just it's I don't do a ton of shit in life, man. I'm busy, but I don't do a lot of different things. I guess it's like more quality over quantity of things. I work out. Well, I mean, I do yoga, I do martial arts, I hang out with uh these two girls that I'm raising. I watch fights, I watch football. That's pretty much it. I don't have a social life. I don't have a romantic relationship. I like to I need to treat and I do all of those things I just mentioned well. I give them a lot of time and a lot of energy. I want to add this podcasting, this digital expression of self, let's call it, podcast, what it is now. But these podcasts are now turning. Podcast is an audio platform, right? And now they're almost all have a video base, and so people will tell me or like text me like, "Oh, I'm gonna watch your podcast, not listen to it." So it's interesting how it's becoming a video platform. So I'm wondering if the term podcast will continue or not. Anyway, whatever this is, podcast. I want to apply the same type of discipline and expenditure of time and energy um, on it that I do in the other areas of my life where I'm successful: martial arts, yoga, meditation, hanging out with kids. So uh, this is granted me the vehicle to do this. The football and the Seahawks and Mike and all of this as is holding me accountable to putting in the reps each week. Fucking longest winded way to say the same shit I said last week. Um, Georgia got a huge win last week. College football is fucking badass. It's so fun. I'm not really watching it. Like, I have my eye on LSU A&M tonight. I grew up a huge LSU fan. I was born in Louisiana. The entire dad side of my family went to LSU. So I've got my eye on LSU always. They look like they're gonna end up heading to be in the SC championship with EJ. Let me put this shit up on a box, right? Well, anyway. Um UJ's off this week, and that's kind of the biggest game of college football this week, LSU A&M. But college football's fun, man. It's fucking fun playing the players. It's chaos. It feels like the Wild West, and the NFL feels much more like sanitized and corporatized and predictable in a way, which is crazy to think because the NFL is supposed to always been the had the most parity of any of the professional sports leagues. Um, it's gone. Looking forward. Oh, quick check in on MMA. Dude, the sport that I actually really do care about is mixed martial arts. And since football season has MMA, cage fighting, UFC, there are other mixed martial arts organizations, but the UFC is the dominant one, right? It's like there's a little more openness, right? As opposed to the other major sports like the NBA, that's it. No one's following anything outside the NBA. NFL, that's it. If you're a American football fan, no one's following anything outside the NFL. In MMA, cage fighting, it's a little more like professional soccer where there's multiple leagues that you could potentially follow, but really it's the UFC. There's a honest, well, all the other organizations, man, they're always in turmoil. Like when they look like they're making a move to kind of no one's ever going to touch the UFC probably, but even like to come in a gobble up, let's say like 1% of the market share, they fuck up. I don't know. There's the three big organizations the last few years have been UFC, Bellator, PFL, which is the Professional Fighters League, and then one championship, which is based in Asia. PFL, the Professional Fighters League, which is also broadcast on ESPN, which UFC is, which is interesting. They have the same broadcast partner and their competitors. But the PFL bought Bellator, which is another promotion league, so to speak. But they've kind of mismanaged, in my opinion, the merging of the two companies. Although I think there's more legally, I think they had to kind of stay separate organizations this year. Um, and then one championship they run by this dude named Shashri Shichatong. I believe he's Thai, but he's like American raised and educated. I think went to Harvard, MBA or something. Sharp guy, but once again, not uh, doesn't seem like the most trustworthy character. There's always reports that like their finances and shit aren't the most accurate as far as their books and stuff and like the financial stability of the organization. And that shit is kind of reared its head again this year with one. They're cool because they don't just do MMA, they do jujitsu, they do kickboxing, they do kickboxing with MMA gloves. They're an interesting martial arts organization. That's how they kind of brand themselves as more about the martial art rather than like the hoopla and more pro wrestling side of things. The UFC is more like mainstream shit talking stuff. Um, but they seem to be on the ropes. So the UFC dominates, which is great. The UFC is fucking badass. But since football season has started, I've fallen way behind in watching MMA, man. And so I'm about a month behind. Once I watch football, get caught up on football this weekend. On Monday, I will watch UFC 307, which took place on October 5th. And today's October 26th. So I'm 3 weeks behind MMA right now. But at one point during COVID, I was, 35 years behind MMA because I hadn't ever watched it really. And end up watching every single UFC fight ever. Uh, so I love that sport. Sport I may engage in myself actually, which I guess kind of leads me to what the fuck I've been doing with my time. It's just last week I got a jujitsu. I've been doing jujitsu now, going on 2 years. I really enjoy it. Over the past year, or really 2024, I've added just training Muay Thai as well, which is kickboxing. I really enjoy that as well. Jiu-jitsu is a little more intense because you get to spar, like you get to actually fight someone at the end of a jiu-jitsu class in every class. Whereas in Muay Thai, can't really do that, or you'd be taking a ton of brain damage. I think some dudes spar like once a week, but I don't even really want to do that because jiu-jitsu, you get to gauge in the intensity of fighting another human being without taking the brain damage. Um, and while I do want to increase or do Muay Thai sparring whatsoever, striking, kicking, punching, sparring, um, I want to get my skills to a particular level, especially defensively, before I do that on a regular basis. And potentially at some point take a mixed martial arts fight, maybe for my 40th birthday, even before then. I would say sometime in the next 5 years, I'll do an MMA fight. I don't even want to say that. I should have said that out loud, but it's definitely on my mind. I'll put it that way. I don't want to commit to anything and not go through with my word or whatever, because the brain damage is a very serious thing. That's the only reason I wouldn't do it is the training, preparing for an MMA fight is going to require you to take some level of brain damage. Um, and engaging in an MMA fight poses the risk of serious brain damage, potentially. Potentially no. Um, or inflicting serious brain damage on someone. So it's an intense endeavor. It's like beyond sport, which is why it's kind of replaced all the other traditional American ball sports as my favorite sport over the last several years. Um, so yeah, that's what I do. I train jujitsu. What I've been doing, my training schedule for the past month or so. One second, sorry. Has been um every other, or actually Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I train. I do an hour of yoga. Then I could do an hour of no-gi jujitsu, Muay Thai, an hour of Muay Thai, and an hour of gi jujitsu. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And those days are intense and they're long. And then I take Tuesday, Thursday off. I don't train. I'll just do yoga, foam roll. The reason I'm doing it that way is I'm doing jujitsu tournament and plan on doing more jujitsu tournaments in the future. And I feel like these jujitsu tournaments are long days. Like you're not sure when your turn is going to go. You're not sure how long of a break you're going to have in between matches. If you're doing both gi and no gi in the tournament, you're not sure how long you're going to have. Like you could do, it's two separate tournaments if you're doing gi and no gi, right? So you might have a break in between those. And obviously that's going to be a lot of rounds if you're doing gi and no gi. And so I think these long days, even though I like to work out every day, and this forces me to take Tuesday and Thursday off guaranteed in between just to let my body recover from long Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. Um, I think the long days of training more accurately simulate what a tournament feels like and the ups and downs. Like, because you'll go no gi class, and every class is like it peaks, right? It builds in intensity. And so you in the class at the top, you might do a cool down or whatever, but you're in the class, whether it's jujitsu or Muay Thai, at your highest intensity. And then you got to go straight into another class, which is beginning at a low intensity. So you got to bring your energy level down and bring it back up and peak. And the third class, bring your energy level down and peak and bring it back up. And that kind of more accurately simulates a tournament. Whereas, like, if you're trying to just like perform best in class, so like in a singular class, like generally speaking, like the first half of jiu-jitsu class is instruction and drilling, and the second half is rolling, like sparring with different people. And so success there is like you're kind of getting warmed up through each roll, and you're kind of leaving it all out there right there in maybe that 30-minute period of rolling at the end of class. Whereas in a tournament, you have multiple matches with long periods potentially in between them. And so it's more the energy management is more complicated. And so we'll see if training this way pays off. I was very long-winded. I was thinking about it as I was saying it. Um, so yeah, we'll see how it pays off. I'm excited about that. But I do get it's nerve-wracking too, dude, because I have a high expectation of myself. I expect to win. I'm not gonna lie. I want to win. I expect to win. That is my expectation for myself to go in these tournaments and win. And so if you don't, and that's your expectation, like it's cool. It's good to have the philosophy. And if I were speaking to someone else, like, dude, just doing the tournament, just engaging in this new discipline, stepping outside your comfort zone is the that's the victory in and of itself. And then doing a tournament, a competition is even more victory. Just doing it. Like what percentage of people are actually doing this? That in itself is a victory. And that's true, right? You should get gratification out of that. But I want to fucking win, man. And I think I'm good enough to win every time I go out there against anybody. So um yeah, that's my expectation. So if you don't fulfill that expectation, it sucks. And it's like, fuck, what was all that for? That's what and it's weird. I'm not even here, and I'm predicting that. So I need to shift. It's like the secret. You should and like manifesting things. You should shift your mindset to a positive outcome. But it's like that almost feels like disrespectful to me when I think about these jujitsu. I do expect to win once again, but it's like it's almost hard to visualize all of that like victory and what it's going to feel like afterward to uh be victorious. It almost feels like disrespectful to the process or your opponent. I don't know, but maybe it's interesting. What was the best mindset to enter with? Complete fear and anxiety that you're going to lose, and like prevention of loss, or simply fulfillment of this positive vision expectation that you have. Somewhere in between, it's like you have high expectations, but you're also extremely weary and anxious of the negative outcome. You don't want to be delusional. You don't want to be overridden with anxiety. Anyway, just kind of the mindset going into it. And this particular tournament's in Stockton, just up near San Francisco. It's like a 4 or 5 hour drive. Um, my mom is flying in with her new boyfriend Doug from Atlanta, and then she's staying the whole weekend. That following weekend, we have like a gala, like a wedding reception type celebratory event through our gym, like our network of gyms. So that should be cool. And uh yeah, so it should be a good time. So that's going on in my life. Um, other than that, that's it. I think that'll be it for me today. I'll check in with y'all. When do I check in with y'all? Next week. On Wednesday, I'm gonna have the Miss Grace interview. Miss Grace is the Jojo and Emily's the two girls I take care of preschool teacher. She's a super cool person that I just kind of immediately bonded with when I would used to drop the girls off in the morning. I don't drop them off anymore. I actually don't see Miss Grace really anymore, except on the occasional time when I drop the girls off in the morning because she only works mornings at the preschool. Um, but did an interview with her, and yeah, the first time I met this woman, I knew she was special. We just connected immediately without even talking. And so she got a very interesting life story, and very glad I did the interview with her. It's been a while. That's been like 2 months ago. I think it was right before the start of the NFL season. I just haven't got around to posting all these interviews I've done since the NFL season. But after that, I don't have any more interviews recorded. Oh, I have me on Alberto Crane's podcast. So I did 3 interviews with Alberto Crane on my podcast. And I also have he invited me on his podcast. We did an interview that got taken down by YouTube. I'm not sure if it's back up. We discussed that on the third part of him on my podcast. So I'm gonna try to get the full video of that and put it on this podcast. And that'll be the following week. And then maybe I'll interview my mom or her boyfriend, Doug, who I've never met before, for the following week. And I've got a couple other jujitsu people I want to interview before the end of the year. And then getting into 2025, wow, this podcast is gonna start taking more of a well, it'll change. Things will change in a positive way. Thus is life. Constant evolution. All right. I love you all. be water, be air, be good, be your highest selves. Oh, see you next week. Pesos.